Well, that's really cool that the whole department is like, the whole department, because you said 3 of the guys.
Well, 3 of them are the instructors. We're already black belts.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And so they kind of brought the idea to Steve Smith, our training captain, and we were having a leadership team meeting, and, we were going around the room, just what people are working on. And, he mentioned that, and they're still kind of in this figuring me out stage. And so I get several glances at me like, like he hasn't heard this before. He didn't give the okay before we started making plans for this. And I think, again, people are looking at my reaction to see like, okay, how's he going to be with something that just kind of surprises him, or whatever. And what I did, which was a natural reaction, was I said, I love it. Love the idea. We're focused on wellness. This is right into that. It's also not only just the physical and mental wellness, because anytime you're doing the martial arts, you're getting that physical, mental aspect, sometimes even spiritual aspect of wellness. But it's also keeping our officers safe, right? Most of our encounters, if we're grappling with somebody, it's probably going to go to the ground. And so the more that they know how to protect and defend themselves. But the other great thing about BJJ is that they are able to control someone with less force, so it's really about how are they able to get someone under control safely and minimize any negative impact to them. And so not only is it beneficial to the officer, it's beneficial to the people that we may be fighting with. And so, but part of that leadership kind of culture and style that I'm trying to develop is that we have so much talent in the organization. They've got great ideas. My organization or this organization is not a top-down ideas generate from top and then trickle down. It's exactly the opposite. They start from down here where the people are doing the job every day, and they're looking for support and opportunities to get resources. And again, for me to get the heck out of their way, and that's what's been the most fun to watch, because we're building out our real-time information center. And I've got a captain and the Arctic manager working on that. And again, they're not bringing me decisions every day. They're coming in my office saying, this is where we are today, and this is where we're going to be 30 days from now, 60 days from now, 90 days from now. They're just doing it. And when you talk about our organization being 225 people, a $40 million budget that can certainly live in a microscope, but has so many divisions, like we were talking about before, everything from patrol, which is the thing that everybody thinks about, the officers in uniform and marked patrol cars, to our traffic unit, to our criminal investigators, to our special investigations. And then you talk about a professional staff in the communications, the answering 911, dispatching police and fire, our animal control professionals, our records professionals that are dealing with 4 to 5, sometimes 600 open records requests a month. And so, and filing all of our cases and all of our arrests and everything that comes in that we generate paperwork on, whether digital or actual paperwork, flows through our records department. It's 4 people, and this scanning in, thousands of documents in a month, and really controlling this really significant portion of our department that are really kind of behind the scenes. And so it's all these people together working for that common goal, for that mission and that vision that we've established.
What's the organizational structure like?
Yeah. So obviously me as the chief, and then I have 1 deputy chief, and then 3 majors. Those majors are 1 over support, which is animal control, records, communications, the Arctic, and then 1 that's over headquarters, which is our criminal investigations. They're also over our not really new, but reinvigorated school resource officer program, and special investigations and training. So we run our full-time training staff and a full-time academy for new recruits that are joining our department as officers, and then all of our in-service training that goes along. And then our operations or patrol division, which is, again, our largest division, that is all what most people think of when they think about the police, the officers that are in uniform, whether they be in patrol or traffic, that are driving marked patrol cars or on the motorcycles. And so, but even within that structure, you have your sworn personnel. So below major, we have captains, and we have 7 captains in the department. But we have quite a few of our professional staff managers, our records manager, our communications manager, our animal control manager, that when I came in the department, their voice really meant a lot to me. I value hearing their voice, their perspective in the organization. And so they are considered really, in my book, at the same level as our captains. And so even though they are not sworn officers, they're our professional staff members, they have the same, I would say, type of role and responsibility and really standing in the department as our sworn captains do. And then beyond that, you have sergeants, which are your kind of first line supervisor, with 25 sergeants. But then again, on the professional staff side of the house, we have our communications supervisors. And they're our first line supervisors in our 911 center. And so, it kind of flows down to that. And then you get down to your line level employees that are everything that really drive everything that we do in the department, everything from our police officers to our detectives, our record staff, as I mentioned, our 911 and communications staff, our animal control officers, all making everything happen. So.
And you oversee everybody?
Everybody. Yeah.
Do you know everybody?
I do, actually. Yeah. So
I would imagine it'd be hard if not, because
right. So one of the things that really I love about our size agency is, and I've worked in, Norman is pretty comparable to the same size. Weatherford, Texas was about 70 sworn officers and about 25 to 30 professional staff, and so about 100 total, so quite a bit smaller. Certainly you get to know everybody fast in that environment. But what I love about our size is that we are the size that we have resources. We don't have, we task our people to do a lot of stuff, but we don't have people that have to wear a lot of different hats. And don't get me wrong. We have exceptional people that wear a lot of hats, but when you're that smaller organization, I tell people that a police department that is like the size of Weatherford operates and functions more like the size of a Broken Arrow than it does maybe a police department that may be 25 sworn or 10 or even smaller. The majority of police departments in this country have less than 10 officers.
What?
Yeah. So the majority, think about that though. But think about it, even in Oklahoma, when you get outside of the Oklahoma City and Tulsa metropolitan areas, think about the size of the agency.
And we're thinking like Bixby, Catoosa, Sapulpa, Sand Springs, Owasso.
And that. But when you start getting out, think even
Stroud,
Pryor,
yeah.
Coeta,
Bartlesville.
Yeah. So,
I wouldn't imagine there's more than 10. You said 10?
10.
Wow.
So the predominant number, something like, 80%, even maybe more than that, of the police departments in the United States have less than 10.
So that's a kind of a wild opportunity for a lot of liability. If you have an officer that's sick, you have one that's on vacation, you have one that's retiring, you just lost 30% of your workforce.
Right.
That's if you're capped at 10.
Well, you've seen there was, some place like Oilton was just in the news, and I'm not picking on them, but they were just in the news where, their police chief and their mayor both were under consideration by the council of potential termination. I think they ended up putting them on performance improvement plans. But when you go to some place like that, your police chief is also working patrol. They're also working cases. Everybody is. Everybody kind of does it, right? I interviewed some dispatch candidates recently, and they work for agencies around the Tulsa area where
God bless those dispatch candidates, man. Oh my God.
They're in dispatch. They're also the jailer. And so they're literally in the 911 center for that community, but they're also watching the inmates in the jail. And, that's the world that I would say is more normal, believe it or not. But what I was going to say about Broken Arrow is, so we have the ability to really have the personnel, but we have much more resources, right? And so that's what makes it really exciting. But your question was really about, have I had a chance? Do I know everybody's names?
Yep.
So when I came on, you interviewed Mr. Spurgeon a few weeks ago. And when I came on, one of the things I committed to him was I wanted to listen to everybody in the department. And I wanted to do it pretty rapidly. So I set a pretty aggressive 30, 60, 90-day plans in place. And one of the first things I did was start having listening sessions. So all of our line level people and across divisions, so they were cross-sectional, I held these listening sessions. I held them during their time at work. So I came in at 10 o'clock at night. I came in at 7 o'clock in the morning. I held them in the afternoon. And when they were at work, I didn't want them to have to come in and be an inconvenience to them. And so every one of these sessions probably some of them had maybe as few as 10, some of them could have 20 to 25, and people could just sign up, and nobody was mandated to go to them, but they could go. The first ones that I held was pretty interesting dynamic and really great in leadership. But when I held the first ones, I was going to do sergeants and below. So sergeants are those first line supervisors. And we had the first one, and I got an email both from a supervisor and from a non-supervisor that said, we think these might be better if we don't have supervisors in the meetings. And so good enough. I put out a thing that said, hey, I'm going to change it up. No sergeants allowed, no supervisors, no professional staff supervisors allowed. We're just going to listen to our frontline people.
And this was advice that you took from someone else. They were like,
yeah, right.
And led with it and trusted that and was like, okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But I still had an issue of I still have to hear our sergeants, right? And I'd already made plans to meet individually with the captains, our professional staff managers and above. And so I had to add them to the schedule. And one of the things that just also a lesson learned is it didn't work out so well is I kind of went last with them. Well, again, that's a first line supervisor. So you get a lot of feedback from people that maybe don't have the best relationship with their first line supervisor, or they speak very generally with, I wish they did this better or whatever. And so by the time I got to them, I felt like I did them a little bit of disservice because I'd already listened to all of the other people in the agency. And then I was kind of coming to them last, but I also was able to kind of reframe that and turn that around and say, I really truly believe this. Your first line supervisor in an organization like that is probably the most valuable commodity that you have, because they are stuck in this position where they are advocating and leading and the closest in contact day to day with the people that are out there doing the job every day. And they themselves are out there doing the job every day, and then at the same time, they have to meter the things that are coming down from the executive staff. They have to be able to dissect that, get to the why of that, and explain that to the people that they're leading. And then at the same time, advocate up for the people that they're leading. And so they're really, in my opinion, the linking pin, that linchpin, if you will, for the entire organization. Probably one of the most difficult jobs in the police department is being in that role.
Is that something that you think you identified because of those listening meetings? And you're like, oh my God, they are the pins.
Right. Well, I knew already just the value of that role. I didn't know culturally where we were with that group, and they're all their own person at the end of the day. And they all have their own stories and their own whys of why did they get in policing? Two, why did they take on the challenge of being in that role that it can be so difficult to do? But what I learned from them is, just like everybody else that I had learned from in the department, they had their own vision of where the culture wasn't where it needed to be, and what they wanted it to be more like. They had their own acknowledgments of areas that they weren't the best version of themselves, where they wanted to develop and grow more and be better, where they wanted to be able to serve their people better, and they had great ideas, because they've been watching this thing. And so it was fantastic. So that's the way really that I got to really meet everybody. And then, while it's old school, and I don't necessarily say I do management by walking around, what I do feel like is it's important for me to go meet them where they're at. I don't really subscribe to the open door policy. I subscribe more to the empty seat policy. Now, I certainly have plenty of stuff I have to do in my office, and my door is always open. But what I'd rather do is be out where they're at. I'd rather go to their workspace and go have conversations with them. And so that's why I say empty seat, that if you walk by my office, it's not uncommon for me not being there. And I'm not because I'm meeting with city administration or something like that. It's because I'm out meeting with the people that are doing the job and really, really building our reputation every single day. And so just listening, more than anything else, just listening to the challenges they face, the things that they think could be better, or the ideas that they had, and I think it's vitally important to do that.
A lot of the organizations, the shit rolls downhill.
Yeah.
And the good ideas only come downhill. Both only come downhill in most organizations, especially in a typical corporate structure.
Right.
I've worked in small business. I've worked in corporate structures. Most of the time, the small business ones are the only opportunities that I've had, especially in an entry-level role way before I started all this,
Right.
to where I had any opportunity to bring an idea and it at least be considered.
Yeah.
And that was appreciative enough, even though it wasn't executed or implemented. Right. So, hey, this is being done this way, but I did it this way and I got it done so much faster and it's cleaner, whatever,
Right.
you know. And it was nice to just be considered. And I'm like, I'm the one doing the work. You're sit at the desk.
Yeah.
Right. And of course, if you try to do that in any kind of large corporate structure, which I did twice,
Right.
I was fired for insubordination twice for trying to bring some ideas to the table. Naturally, and that's why I'm in the seat that I am. I'm a little bit of an innovator. It's not that I am disobedient to authority,
Right.
even though my mother would say at 4 that I am, but
Yeah.
I'm much more of an adult now, right? Than that. But I've always kind of been like, okay, how can we do this better? There's an easier way to do this. Try to innovate and change. And sometimes if it's not broken, don't fix it.
Yeah.
And I get that too. But I remember working at Quick Trip, and it's the only job out of 17 jobs that I've had before I started this, whatever this is, to where I'd go back and work.
Yeah.
And as kind of because of the majority of the culture that I experienced when I was there. And people always quit because of people. They don't usually quit the job. They quit the people.
100%.
And it's usually because of the people above them, right? And it's usually because they don't listen. They're not even open to understanding them at all, right? And even if it's at any level, please just listen. Like, even if you don't take it and execute on it, that's okay. But I at least just want to have a place to where I can share these ideas, because a lot of times people will start a job. The good team members will be excited about what they're doing, and they want to contribute, and they want to see improvement and progress, right? And they want to share those, and they want to share that with somebody who is also like-minded with them too, and shares that passion. Let's move this thing forward together. And I remember at Quick Trip as a clerk working at some stores, the managers, assistant managers, whatever they were, they loved working at the counter. And they wouldn't clean the bathrooms. They wouldn't do the checklist, which I'm pretty sure they still have the checklist now, whether it's digital or paper. But they didn't take out the trash. They didn't want to spray the power wash the parking lots or anything like that, because that's the clerk's job.
Right.
I ain't gonna go wipe down the restrooms. I'm not gonna sweep the floors or mop the floors or whatever.
Or the worst is, I had to do that when I was in your role.
Yeah.
Now that I'm in this role, I don't have to do
That's not my job anymore.
Right.
Yeah. That's in your job description. Right. But I admired the few that actually did. And I appreciated the ones I did. Yeah. Man, I wanted to work harder for them and harder with them. And I felt more cohesive as a team with them too.
Right.
And so that's definitely the culture that I've continued to work for with me and my staff, where I don't care if no idea is a bad idea.
Yeah.
No communication is the worst. I want you to always be able to tell me, what's going on. And I always want to put myself in those positions like what you do.
Yeah.
So I want to go out, and just because it's not my job to go shoot a video, or it's not my job to touch something on a website, or it's not, quote, my job to go do whatever it is, I still want to go out and I want to go experience those with them, because that'll open up doors for them to be able to communicate with me. That'll put me on their level, so then I can understand again how it's worked. My wife recently switched jobs, and to continue to apply that one last time. To continue to apply that is, when she left her role, the person that she was that was overseeing her role was clueless. Didn't know what was happening, what apps were being used. And even though there was a handoff and it was like, hey, here's everything that I'm doing, it's all pretty neat and organized in binders, digital files, whatever it was. And it was a clean pass off. She's like, I've got to start all over. I've failed at and being able to make sure that be able to understand what you're doing, when you're doing it, how you're doing it, those sort of things. I've completely just let go,
right,
and not stayed in the loop.
Yeah.
There's a big disconnect when that happened.
Well, I will tell you, you hit on a couple of things there that are really important to me. The first one, you talk about being that innovator, right? Everybody should be in the mindset of being an innovator, because I think whether you're talking business, government, nonprofit, any level of organization, if you are not looking for the next thing, if you're not looking for ways to be more efficient, more effective, I use this term called VUCA, and I have to be careful when I say it so I don't say anything inappropriate, but it stands for VUCA, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And I don't care. We frame things now as pre-COVID, post-COVID, whatever. I will tell you, and I don't care again if you were corporate, small business, whatever.
Yeah, we treat it like the Jesus times. Is BC or AD?
Either way, whether you were pre-COVID, post-COVID, you operated in an environment that was all of those things: volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And to say we're just going to rest on what got us here, the success that we've had, or the thing that like somebody like you probably for sure, and definitely for me, is, well, this is the way we've always done it, right? To rest on that is just wrong in my opinion, right? Because the everything around us is changing constantly. And now it's changing at this hyper speed that you have to have innovators in your organization. And maybe not everybody's wired that way, but the problem is that when you celebrate, or especially if you as a company or an organization, and you have a value on the wall that says we value innovation, and then you slap the hand or cut the head off of people that bring you innovative ideas, or the other one that I think is equally as bad is if you allow them to go with this innovative idea and it crashes and burns, and then you slap their hand or cut their head off, then you're not an innovative organization, right? Because if it only takes everybody else to see that happen once or twice, do you think they're going to bring you innovative ideas? Or you're going to take a chance on something? And so I think part of that as a leader is you've got to have the stomach sometimes for that. And even from a growth perspective, I can tell you that was one of the hardest things for me to overcome in my first role as chief in Weatherford, Texas, was watching people that I was trying to grow and develop in the organization and seeing a path or seeing an idea that I thought, man, this is going to go not so well, right? But I felt like I've got to let them go with it. I've got to let them experience this and then also be able to get themselves out of it, And so as long as it wasn't unethical, immoral, unlawful, right, to let them kind of grow through that. And then even when there were those times that even maybe I didn't know from experience, but I just thought, I don't know how this is going to work out. And then see it be something that became exceptional, So I think you have to be able to look at that risk and accept the fact that everything that we're going to do has some level of risk to it. There's nothing that you can do that is completely risk-free. And so you have to be comfortable with that level of risk, and you do your best to try to mitigate those things. But at the end of the day, I think to grow as an organization, to grow as an individual contributor, or any of that stuff, is you've got to have some leeway and the support, especially from those above you, that are going to allow you to try those things, to step outside that box. And I think that's how we really get to that exceptional kind of area, and also able to reach our potential, not only again as an individual, but as an organization.
Are you in charge of hiring and firing?
I am to a degree. Obviously, I work for somebody too. And again, Mr. Spurgeon, our city manager. And so ultimately I would say, he doesn't weigh in so much on the hiring decisions, unless there are certain things. We're getting ready to hire a public information officer, for the police department specifically. That's a really, really important position. And a lot of times is as much a face of the city as any other position that we would have in the city. And so he certainly wants some influence and input on that. But I think we also have the relationship where if I'm bringing that recommendation, it may be more of a checkoff for him on the termination, because that's a tough thing. Again, I would provide that recommendation, but at the end of the day, that's his role to truly, sign his name to it and support that. But in doing that, he's also taken on maybe some of that risk off my shoulders, as a boss. And so we're providing that recommendation, myself and human resources director. But ultimately he's the one that's going to make that decision. So
this is going to sound silly at this point to ask, but what do you do day to day?
Oh yeah. You name it, man. So, I would say that, for the most part, it's, no 2 days are the same. It can depend on what we have going on. I have a lot of meetings. for sure, and not just internal meetings. But part of my role I see too is building our brand. And it's weird sometimes. I think it's not weird to you. This is what you do for a living. But in the government world, to say build your brand it's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not that. But however, I also work for an organization in the city of Broken Arrow that I think understands building that brand very clearly. I think they do an exceptional job of that. But then beyond that, I think part of my role is supporting that brand building for the city of Broken Arrow, and then continuing to build that brand for the Broken Arrow Police Department. So I have a lot of meetings with outside entities, ways that we can collaborate, partner. I have a lot of interaction with our community partners already that we have existing. And again, just looking for those things of where we can be better partners, where we can grow those relationships. I spend time looking at our operations, but again, I don't have to get into the weeds of our operations. And that's why having such exceptional people around you is I get to really focus more on the future. What does the future look like for the Broken Arrow Police Department? Because I have people that are managing the day to day, and we have conversations and cuss and discuss things. But at the end of the day, I trust them wholly and completely to run their divisions, and then on down for those supervisors below them to run their shifts and all of that. And so, and then I would say another piece of what I do is that development, that individual development. Part of my role, I always feel like when I'm in this position is to create. I just happened in Weatherford and it's happened in Broken Arrow, and in both places I have the same kind of pledge, which is I was fortunate to come in from the outside to an organization. But if I do what I was hired to do, the next chief for the Broken Arrow Police Department, hopefully way down the line, right? But the next chief will be an internal chief, and it'll be a really difficult decision among multiple highly qualified candidates that are ready to go. So I feel like part of my role is constantly building that next generation of leaders in the organization, and the people that are going to replace me.
Which I don't think a lot of leaders do anyways.
Right.
So I think they get into a role because they're power hungry.
Right. Well,
or money hungry, one of the two. It's usually a bias.
I'll tell you, really large police departments like your sometimes Tulsa, Oklahoma City, Dallas, places like that. The average lifespan, if you will, for a police chief, 3 years. 3 years. Now think about that. For our size agency, I would say it's in the 5 to 7 year range. And so, what we're talking about, and this is going to be a little bit Simon Sinek-esque, but that infinite mind game, right? Of, what I just talked about is a 10, 15, 20, 25 year commitment of not just developing the next chief, but maybe the next several chiefs. And I think sometimes as a police chief, a couple of things happen. You ask me what I do on a daily basis. And I think sometimes you can get in the habit of there's always going to be fires to put out. There's always going to be fires to put out. You can get in.
Even though that's not your job, you're not a firefighter.
Right. Yeah. There's always going to be fires. So you can get in the habit of focusing each day on putting out fires. And then you go home, rest, and repeat, right? Or you can, again, allow your very capable staff to manage those things and involve you when you need to be involved, seek advice, those kinds of things. But you can spend your time, effort, and energy on the positive things, the things that are going great, and again, that future piece. But I think what happens in those, some chiefs' mindset is they get so caught up in putting those fires out, and they get so caught up in their own longevity, if you will, or just survival, quite frankly, right? It doesn't take much to get fired as a police chief, to be honest with you. One of the things I always say is that as my role as a police chief, I'm putting my faith and my job and my family's livelihood in potentially a 21-year-old police officer that works night shift patrol, that if they encounter a situation, they're going to make the right decision. That's, if you think about it, that can be pretty uneasy, right? Especially if you don't trust the people around you. And it's funny. I'm really close friends with Chief J.D. Younger in Edmond, and I give him credit for this but he's so accurate. When you're in the role of the police chief, it is, you have to trust everybody in your organization, but everybody in your organization gets to choose whether or not they trust you. I have no choice but to trust the people that are in our organization. I can't work 24/7. I can't go do the job for them. The number of calls, 6,000 plus calls for service a week, or a month. And so I can't go do those things for them. I have to trust that our culture, our values, our mission, our training, our supervisors, all those things are on point. And fortunately for us, I think they are, but I think that's such a powerful reminder of, when you said not everybody's doing that, I think sometimes it is just that survival mode. They get into the survival mode, and it's really just about today making it to the next day. And for me, it's that, and I know we're going to talk a little bit about Clifton Strengths and stuff in a minute, but I'm definitely in the ideation and futuristic, and it's not in my top 5, but it's in my top 10, and I lean into them quite a bit. So I am doing, I'm constantly thinking about, I'll tell you where my focus is. This is a really long-winded answer, but it just made me think.
We're good. I got time if you got time.
Yeah, I'll have plenty of time. My focus really is on the people in the organization. I don't get caught up in the minutia of stuff. And so, and the reason why I say that is we were talking about this idea of leaders sometimes, or maybe a lot of times, maybe, we're the exception, but leaders aren't building for the future and growing and developing the people that are going to take their job one day. But for me, if you're investing in your people, then that's really what it's about. I say all the time, people, the average person, you said earlier, people leave their supervisor or their leader. They don't leave the organization. And 1,000% believe that. And I think really most people want autonomy, mastery, and purpose. That's what they seek. And they want an opportunity to be developed. They want an opportunity to get feedback. And they want to grow, and they want to feel like they have purpose. They want to feel like what they're doing has purpose, and they want a chance to master the profession that they're in. And then they want that autonomy to be able to go out and do their job without that micromanagement or that interference, and feel like they're going to be supported while they're doing that, while they're making decisions. I go back to that 21-year-old. We are asking, and I use that as an example because 21 is right when you can be licensed as a peace officer.
Yeah, and it's true. Yeah.
I have some 21-year-olds.
Yeah.
You're asking a potential 21-year-old to deal with complex situations and make decisions, extremely mature decisions that impact people's lives and that ultimately impact your entire community.
That guy's brain isn't even developed yet.
Right.
Literally.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
Right. And so because if the decision is wrong, the impact is not only to that group or individual, it's to your entire community.
Oh my God. Yes. So that's going to lead us into the community trust and engagement part.
Yeah.
And so you're talking about how the city of Broken Arrow has a brand.
Yeah.
Those values are trusted by the community, right? There's a huge alignment there that nobody really talks about. Like, it's not just a well-known thing. It's just a thing that's felt.
Yeah.
Right. That's a good brand. Like, how do you feel when you grab a cold Coke off the shelf and pour it? Like, that's a feeling that builds a good brand.
Yeah.
And so you have to, you're building trust in your people, and you're also combining that with the community. So there's some sort of tie here I'm trying to get at.
Oh, yeah.
You have to develop your people in a way to be able to carry on that brand. Yeah. And so how are you connecting all that?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's a great question. And one of the things that I think of is I read something one time from Richard Branson, and I find it in a lot of different areas. Of Simon Sinek's talked about it before and things like that. But, Richard Branson said, in the past, we've always talked about the customer's always right. The customer's always right. And think about it in policing and in city government in general. We have customers. We serve a community. And so we have customers. Now, what makes us a little different is, I say this about the police department, is how different would policing be in America if when you called 911, you said, and we said, Broken Arrow Police Department, and you go, nah, I don't want the Broken Arrow Police Department. I'd rather have the Bixby or the Tulsa Police Department respond. I don't really like the Broken Arrow Police Department, right? But you don't get that choice. Now, you get a choice where you live, but that's not always the case. Not everybody can just pick up and move to a different community because they don't trust the police department or whatever. But we still have to treat it like we're in that private sector where we're building that identity and that trust and all that. And we're going out and earning that every single day.
That's what Michael said.
Yeah.
Michael was talking about how the customers is the community.
Yeah.
Right?
100%. You have to treat it like it is customers and that you can lose them, and then what happens when businesses start to lose customers? They usually don't. They either better start changing things pretty quickly or they're not going to be around in a little while. Right. And so, but what Richard Branson said is, this mindset of the customer's always right. It creates this image of, I'm going to poop on the employees to show the customer when they're right, and what Richard Branson said is that my employees are going to be right. But when you treat your employees with respect and dignity, you support them. I add in when you give them a place to thrive and flourish in your organization. Well, guess what happens when they go out and engage with your customers? They create great experiences because they feel supported. They feel like they have an opportunity to thrive and flourish in your organization. And they believe in that purpose. They believe in our mission. And so when they go out and do that, and we talk about all the time at the police department, the second mile, it's about what are we doing after that initial contact. And I do think that's one of the things that separates us from a lot of other police departments is we're talking about, I see on a daily basis, our people go that second mile that will take something that a lot of police departments would just show up to your house, write the basic report, ship it off to detectives, and maybe or maybe not, you get contacted by a detective in a week, a month, whatever. I see all the time our people take that and be like, no, I'm going to go to this business. I'm going to look at the cameras. I'm going to see if there's a suspect. I'm going to follow up on that. And, in a lot of cases, we're closing cases even sometimes at the patrol level on the same day, and that I can just tell you is not something that happens normally in a lot of places. But I was out working, and that's another thing. It's really important for me to be out and do it. And I still don't get to do it enough. I would like to do it every week if I could, and I can't. But
to be out like patrolling?
Yeah. Oh, I love doing it.
Really?
For several reasons. One, it brings me back to my roots because all of us in this uniform, that's where we started. And you can never forget that. It's your biggest division. It's the division that is in the most contact with those customers every single day, face to face. And so you can never forget that that's where you came from. And it's really important to me. So I love doing it. Two, I get to experience the things that they're experiencing. So sometimes when we're making those silly decisions on high and we go down and we're trying to implement those silly decisions that we made and it doesn't work out so well, then you get that firsthand perspective of like, hey, that was a pretty silly decision. Maybe we should look at that. Or when you're hearing like things that are obstacles for them or things that resources that they need, and you go out and do the job that they're doing and you're doing it alongside them, then it's so much different when you're experiencing it firsthand than when it's coming to you in a memo form that's been touched by 3 or 4 people in that chain of command. And so, but I was out working and we had a recovery of a stolen vehicle. The vehicle had been stolen in Tulsa, but the residents actually lived in Broken Arrow. And, a lot of property for the victim was still in the vehicle, all that kind of stuff. And an officer shows up. They show up because, one, they probably didn't think I could take care of doing the actual report, which I could.
Oh, the chief can't do a patrol's job. He hasn't done this in 20 years or whatever.
They felt bad about it. Was his district, and I think he felt bad about like, oh, the chief's over there taking my call.
Or he doesn't think I can do it.
Right.
Yeah.
And so anyway, he shows up and but it was so impactful because we know where the victim lives. They live in Broken Arrow, right kind of on the edge, right where you're going into Tulsa, but it was still in Broken Arrow. And we tried to call them several times to see if they wanted to come get their car. Otherwise, it's going to go get towed. It's going to incur towage fees, all these other kinds of things, right? And he's like, hey, why don't I just run over there and see if they're there? And it's several miles away. And as simplistic and as ordinary as that may sound, I promise you that's not happening in a lot of police departments, right? So he does. He goes over there. He makes contact with them. He comes back. He's like, yeah, they're on their way. They were able to come back, get their property. And And again, that's an example of going the second mile, and I could tell story after story, a story of that. Somebody left their wallet at a car wash and, somebody came along and took it. Again, a lot of patrol officers in a lot of other communities, and I'm not knocking other communities. I've been doing this for 28 years, so I've seen it. They're going to take that report and be like, yeah, we'll be in touch. Our officer shows up. They get a hold of the car wash owner. They're like, hey, do you have video? They start watching the video. They get a license plate. That's a local person. They go to that person's house, and lo and behold, that person's driving by. They make a traffic stop, and they've got the wallet, and we do all that in the same day. And so, again, I think it's really about all those things, but it's people creating that buy-in and what we're trying to do, what that brand is, what our mission is, what we value, all those things. And when they have that buy-in, just watch out, because that is when they go out every day and they're doing that extra effort, because they really believe in what they're doing. And then we are blessed. It goes without saying, but in Broken Arrow, we are beyond blessed to be supported by our community. A tremendous amount of community support. But it's this constant reminder to me and our staff that even with that support, we have to earn it every day. It only takes that one thing to really start to shatter that. And so we've got to earn it every day. And that's not to say that we're never going to mess up. What we do, again, is highly complex, very volatile, a lot of uncertainty. And so we can make mistakes. And to me, the other part of that is when we make mistakes that we own it. We're accountable for it. We're transparent in it, and we 100% own it. So.
Yeah, it didn't take much for the Roman Empire to fall, did it?
Right, exactly.
How do you measure that, successful community trust? Is there it's going to sound formalized when I say this, but is there KPIs? Is there numbers of events or number of recommendations, or you have some sort of review system or something, or surveys?
So we just did a micro survey. We did a survey. The city did a survey before I came on board that was a little bit more comprehensive. We use a company to do a lot of our surveys. You've probably heard a lot, and I'm sure Mr. Spurgeon talked a little bit about the 2026 GEO bond issue and those kinds of things.
The GO bond?
The GO bond. So we're doing micro surveys, but we just did a police and fire micro survey, and it had questions that were similar to that. We didn't necessarily use the word trust, but it was kind of our rating. How do people rate us? Our responsiveness, our performance, our effectiveness. And so that's one way. Another way, and this is not a scientific way, but it's just pay attention to what's on social media, right? Because you're going to have your naysayers, but what I see a lot of times is that when we do have a naysayer get on board, and the other thing that we found out is most of the people that troll our page, our social media, don't even live in Oklahoma, and they dang sure don't live in Broken Arrow. But what I do find is it takes literally seconds before our citizens get on there and start combating whatever they're saying, that we don't even have to respond to it. And so, again, that's more of an anecdotal thing, but we see it all the time. We see when somebody gets on there, the person that doesn't have a picture with their profile, and their profile was created 10 days ago, and they don't have any friends, and they make a comment, right? People jump on that comment. And so that tells you a little bit about, I think, how people feel.
Do you pay attention to those? Stuff? Do you notice it?
I do notice it. I'm off and on and what I mean by that is sometimes I can tell that if it's going in a direction, not necessarily on our page, but we have some other community pages that if I can see it going in a general negative direction, I might just switch it off and be like, you know what, I'm not going to wade off into the comments, right?
Avoid the comments.
Be about the police department. Quite frankly, a lot of times it's not about the police department, and that's the thing. But I still am a representative of the city, and so I'm defensive of the city. And so when it's about the city, then I'll kind of be like, if it's more about the police department, I definitely will pay more attention. And I also don't just dismiss those things too. If there's something there, then I look into it more. The one thing there's many things, but one of the things that I love about Broken Arrow and even the size that we are is I still feel like with 120,000 plus people, and that argument is more or less, but we know there's quite a few people there. You can still call and get an appointment with me. you can still call and we can have a conversation if you weren't happy with something that we did. And I think that's really important. That's a culture that Mr. Spurgeon really talks about too. And so I think that's an expectation with any of our directors, but certainly with our police department is if you're not happy, then you have the opportunity to talk to me directly. And we look into that. Now we have the grace that a lot of our stuff's now caught on body worn cam. And so it doesn't take us long to figure out. And sometimes we do catch, right? Like, hey, we could have done better. And we use that as opportunities to grow and opportunities to, it's not really always about if it was not an intentional act by an officer or something like that, but it was an opportunity where, we probably should have done better in that. Then we use that as an opportunity to grow and be better. And we acknowledge, absolutely, we could have been better. So,
what's the IACP?
International Association of Chiefs of Police. So it is an organization that's been around for over 100 years, but it's really a lot of your chief executives and executives from around the world in policing. It's a large organization. They do work throughout the year, but they, just to put it in scale, they'll host an annual conference that will have anywhere from 16 to 17,000 attendees.
Wow.
Yeah. So a massive conference.
And there's some national recognition that did you have that?
Yeah, we did. So when I was in Weatherford, one of the things that we're duplicating that here in Broken Arrow. But when I was in Weatherford, one of the things, again, when I talk about focusing on your people, wellness was so important. It still is so important to me. This job demands so much of the people that are involved in it. And I'm not talking about just the officers. There are opportunities for things like vicarious trauma with our dispatchers, with our records clerks. Our records clerks are, they're watching body worn cam. They're seeing bad incidents. They're maybe not there firsthand, but they're experiencing those things. They're reading reports where we've had maybe a sexual assault of a child or something like that. And so it can impact everybody in our police department. And this job asks so much of the people that commit themselves to it, that I feel like we as leaders owe it to them to, again, get them to have opportunities in the organization to thrive and flourish, but not only while they're there and beyond. One of the statistics that I've hung my hat on for a long time, and that really still bothers me to this day, we've been studying stress in policing for 60 years. And we're not any better today at dealing with it than that's not true. We're a little better.
There's a lot of things that's just innate.
Right.
As humans.
Yeah. But we can be so much better, but the statistic I was talking about is the average police officer, and this needle has not moved in a long time, dies by age 57 in this country. So at the same time that the life expectancy of males and females in this country has grown over the last, with technology, with medical care, with nutrition, with all of these things, at the same time while it's grown, we have not grown the life expectancy of our police officers. The number one killer for police officers is cardiac disease. And it's not just from being out of shape or what we eat, it's the stress that comes along with the job. And on that note, a lot of people automatically think that it's the stress of what we encounter out there. And it's not to say that that's not stressful and it doesn't have impact, but the unreally spoken stress occurs from the stress that is inside the four walls of the police department, right? Sometimes poor leadership, the interpersonal conflict that can develop, maybe stringent policies and procedures that really limit your ability to think outside the box and to come up with creative solutions to problems and things like that. We have a bad habit in policing of over legislating our police officers with rules and procedures as a risk mitigation strategy, right? So back to this hiring these 21-year-olds and giving them a badge and a gun and this incredible amount of expectation,
responsibility.
But then we try to mandate how they're going to act on every single call when there's no way that we can even begin to understand all of the little complexities. Even if it's the same type of call, the same disturbance at the same residence is going to have a different layer to it every time that we respond.
Yeah. I'm coaching 6th grade BA football, tackle. And it's not my first time coaching kids. It's not my first time Man, I used to do VBS and totus and like all this stuff with kids, and I'm the oldest of 5. Like I like kids. Kids are fun, especially between like, I don't know, 7 and 12. Man, there's this exploration there. I don't know, whatever it is. So, but anyway, so my son, he's in there, and I'm working with a bunch of different positions and a couple other dads. Particularly yesterday, we were practicing, and I was working with the linebackers. And so I was trying to instill some confidence in them on reading the offensive line and what's going on and behind the line. And as the play develops, and trying to instill in them like some confidence, like you're going to make bad calls, and you're going to have to flow with the play, because your cornerbacks over here, if they're playing man, they're just going to follow this guy. Every single time they're going to follow that guy. But you, as Mike, that middle linebacker, you're going to have to decide what's happening as it's happening and make split-second decisions. Do I go up? Do I go back? Do I go left or right? Or do I speed up or slow down, or what's happening? And it's also your responsibility to try to call this out ahead of time, to give your left and right linebackers and your defensive line some idea of what's supposed to happen next. So I was like trying to instill some confidence in him, and the other two, like, you've got to flow with the play and you've got some responsibility. Same thing with our center, with our center.
Yeah.
I'm like, you are responsible for starting with the huddle. If your huddle is unorganized, your play is going to follow along with that. Yeah. That is your responsibility. You own that. If it is a bad snap, that is you. You own that. That is yours. If it's a good snap, you own it, and that is yours. If it is a good huddle, you own that. So flip-flop that. Same thing. And trying to instill some responsibility in each one of them and their own particular roles. And then for some reason, over the last 2 or 3 weeks we've been practicing, they're not communicating.
Yeah.
They're just afraid to communicate. I'm like, I know you understand what you're supposed to do. That's great. He understands. You understand yes. Okay, cool. You both know what you're doing individually. Tell each other, I got him. Cool. You're both on the same page. Because you know what happens whenever they shift like this, and now you both are going after the same guy. He shoots that gap. He gets the quarterback. And now quarterback's hit. He's hurt and he's out.
Yeah.
Now what? Like, you guys could have prevented that if you just communicated and made sure you're on the same play. Like, whatever. So it's interesting, like, also trying to, as we're communicating about how everyone in their organization has their unique roles, we're talking about, some core values, and we're talking about communication and trust and trusting each other. Same thing in football. And we're bringing that all the way down to, like, 6th grade tackle football. And like, these players that communicate, and they need to be able to trust each other, and they need to be able to kind of stay in their lane, but then also be able to flow as the play flows along with that. And as coaches, we got to be able to trust them and instill the confidence in them to be able to know it's okay to make mistakes. And we know they're going to make mistakes. And sometimes I also want them to be able to know, like, if you have something better, tell me. If you see something that I don't, I'm not there in your shoes looking at it the way that you are at that moment.
Right.
So like, if I didn't see something, tell me.
Yeah.
I know a lot of times, like, coaches, like leaders in organizations, they also do get a little hungry to win and a little less understanding along that too. And sometimes it's their way. And I've been doing this for 25 years and I know what I'm doing.
Right.
That was another thing that I came across in organizations to where I'm like, that's great. You've been doing this for 30 years, and just because you've been doing it this way and it's not broken doesn't mean it can't be better. Again, the innovation side of things. And also, you're not the backbone of this org. I'm on the ground floor. I'm the one sweeping and mopping and talking to the customers. I'm the one using the register, and the register sucks. I'm like, fix this, or the inventory just keeps running out, whatever it is. So like, same thing with coaching and the kids. I'm like, sometimes I see the coaches like not listen to the kids. I'm like, they've got ideas. They're running the plays. They're working it. And I'm like, you're telling them what to do, but they're not understanding what they're doing along the line. So they need to be able to understand how the play develops. Show them in a visual component. Okay, let them walk the play. Don't run it. Don't try to force them to all understand it at the same time. It's like, it's very hard too. We have 17, 16, something like that on our team. So it's a small department. So one of our players aren't there. 2 of them are on vacation. One of them gets hurt and sick. Y'all are starters. Yeah. Every one of you, there ain't no one trading out. Y'all better be conditioned.
Yeah.
So again, there's a little bit of risk and liability in that. So
Yeah.
It's just fun to coach that too. And I mean, just like here at work, I run a lean team here too. If
Yeah.
one of us are going to be on vacation next week. So now what? Now we got to make sure that she's prepared to be able to go on vacation and really break. And we're got to be prepared to know what's on her plate. And also I want to work with her to make sure that when she comes back, she's not drowning.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, one of the things you really hit on there was this idea of communication, and you can imagine in a 24/7 operation, 365 communication. You go into any police department and survey its personnel. Somewhere in the list of things that they wish were better would be communication. And that was one when I did the listening sessions. There were a couple of different things going on. There was definitely silos being built or had been built. There was a little self-preservation. We talked about the self-preservation from the chief earlier, but there was a level of self-preservation that can happen among your employees too, right? And that guarding of resources. And so, that ability, there's several of the things that you hit on there, that ability to really recognize that as a team. So you've got your line, whether offense or defense, you've got your skill players, but all those pieces have to mesh and work together. And, and communication is a piece of that. I think certainly the bigger picture, the understanding of the why, I know when I was coming up, like the mindset was like, well, you have this role, you don't need to understand the why, the big picture. And I think that's so false, right? So it starts with really me being able to communicate sometimes maybe the challenges that I have, or maybe some of the pressures that I may be feeling of, hey, we're going to do this. And it really is, maybe it's not the best thing for us, but it's the common ground. It's the middle that is the best for everybody. And so it's being able to recognize, but it's also being able to just, instead of, well, just do it because I said to do it, but really understanding the challenges and the things that maybe somebody at a certain level doesn't see that you're dealing with here, the unintended consequences or any kind of ripple effect may be happening with something that when you're at a certain level seems just like common sense. But when you get to another level, it's like, oh, now there's all of these other things that we have to consider. And so I think that's a big piece of it. But really top of mind of communicating, and going above and beyond as many ways as we can to be able to communicate. One of the things that just happened this week, and it's always a work in progress, right?
Aren't we all?
So for me, when I was doing the listening sessions, one of the common themes was about awards. Officers would be put in, or even our professional staff would be, people would submit for them for an award for anything that they had done. And we have an awards committee. We have a process. The awards committee would make those decisions or recommendations, and then they come to me for a final decision. And then at the end of the year, we have an awards banquet. And very curiously, it was like, well, we don't know what's happening until the end of the year. And then if not everybody goes to the awards banquet, or certainly you have to have somebody that stays back and works instead of going to the awards banquet or whatever, then we don't even know like who got awards or whatever. And so since I've been there, we've had 2 of these committee meetings, and I don't sit on them, but they send me the recommendations. And it just so happened this week, the recommendations came into me, and I'm reading the recommendations. I'm approving them. They were all really great and well done. And then the memo has the people that had been recommended for the award, who actually recommended them, and then what the committee's recommendation was, whether to approve it or was it a higher or lower award or something like that. And they can range anything from a Medal of Valor to a life-saving award to something like a shift letter of commendation. And there's Chiefs awards. There's just all this kind of stuff. Well, as I'm thinking about that, I put out this collectively. We put out, but I'm the last one that touches it and sends it out. This weekly summary, and I always try to have like that. That's where I have a chance to really communicate what's going on in that broader view of things with the department. And highlight the actions of our people and all kinds of different things. And as I was thinking about, it's a challenge every week to kind of also have this message that is really keeping everybody on track and really inspiring people and doing all that. And then I'm thinking back throughout my week, I'm reflecting, and it hits me. I'm like, oh, they were talking about these awards, and why don't we put these out? Like when I get the memo and I approve it, like why are we not doing it more contiguous with what the person did? And so I walked around to people that have been there before me and people that are involved in the process, and they were like, well, we just never have. And they weren't knocking it. They were just like, well, we just have never thought of it. And I missed it the first time. Again, this was the second quarter. We do it once a quarter. This was the second quarter. So I had to go back and grab the first quarter. But my point is, it's like always trying to look for those opportunities where, we can improve. We can improve, in communication, especially being one of those. And the simplest things, that also comes from listening. You brought that up in your story about understanding like what's not being communicated and how can we improve that. And part of the culture too, of making sure that it's happening all the way down. I have seen numerous times in my role, and not necessarily as much in BA, but where I've been, where either communication up to my office gets stopped somewhere, and I may be like the last person to know, or my communication down gets stopped somewhere and it never reaches its intended audience. And so I started off earlier talking about that walking around and being in their environment and all that kind of stuff. And when you start to establish those relationships, and when they feel comfortable actually sitting down and having a conversation with me, because I'll also walk into a room and people, just because of my position, they get that, especially if they're new, they get that almost that shock and fear in their eye, right? Or if I come up and have a conversation with them, and one of the things my favorite thing to do is like when people have not even written somebody up for an award, but they've just acknowledged like really solid work. And then I see that person in the hallway or something, and I mention it to them and I make a comment about it. I think that's really important. And I think back on my journey of like, that was really cool when it would happen to me. And so I try to do those things. But my point is that value of the voice that they have, and where are we missing the mark? And also the expectation of like, we're constantly a work in progress. So, we may get it right tomorrow, and then the next day, we may miss the mark again. But we've got to have that free flow of information and that piece of communication to know that we missed the mark. And that's probably one of the more common things that I have when I'm even talking about with our staff is you have to have the courage, and I have to be able to afford you the psychological safety to tell me when I'm missing the mark, to tell me when my actions and behavior are not aligned with what I'm saying. If I'm saying one thing, but my actions are saying something else, then I need you to have the courage to tell me that I'm misaligned.
Just because I'm the chief?
Right.
Doesn't make me better than you?
Right. Exactly.
That's some humility.
Yeah.
And that's hard to I think that's hard to find.
Yeah.
I can admire that.
I think it's absolutely vital though.
Yeah.
Because how else are you going to be able to serve them if they're not able to look you in the eye and say, hey, Chief, that thing you did, that wasn't, that didn't exhibit the values that we.
And you not just snap at them.
Right. Yeah.
Or fire them on the spot.
Right. So I think that's important, right? But that's the other thing is, as human beings, as professionals, we've got to be able to have those kinds of conversations and look at it from a different lens of it's not criticism. It's not getting on to you. It's to help us all be better at the end of the day. It really is about that coaching piece and that mentor area. And, I can be mentored and have been by people that are line level employees. I learn lessons from them. So I don't come in the door with all of the knowledge and all of the
wiseness
answer, right? And so I think it's important to have that open dialogue and that communication. And it has to be two-way communication. You mentioned that in your story, and that's what really kind of jogged my thinking on that is that there has to be this free flow of communication. And, if you don't have it, then you are going to miss the mark somewhere. And then if you're not establishing that psychological safety, people are never going to tell you when it's not there, right? Or when you're not living up to their expectation. Because I think that's as important for the image that we have in the community of my position and who I am and what I represent, that I'm representing every single member of that organization. And so I mentioned earlier when I'm having these external meetings and all that, I walk into them knowing that I'm not representing just Lance Arnold. I'm representing
110,000 people in the community.
And I'm representing the city of Broken Arrow and the community itself. So, if I come in and I'm unprepared, or I, am just a poor example of what we stand for, then that image is going to be what people think about our entire community, our entire organization. And that's what we tell our officers. The average person may come into contact with a police officer one time in their entire life. One time.
That's it.
Think about it. You could go out and poll people today that have never had been stopped on a traffic stop.
That was my dad, actually.
Yeah. So, but when they do have that one contact, they're going, and they should, judge your entire department by the quality of that contact. I mean, they are. That's why every single contact matters. But we have to take that same mindset and do it internally too. When we talk about in policing, this idea of procedural justice, that there's transparency, that people have voice, that there's fairness and some form of equity, right? And we talk about how important that is in a community to feel like there's procedural justice. Well, one of the first things that I always try to make sure is that before we can have procedural justice in the community, we dang better have it inside the police department. We can't model it in the community if we're not doing it inside the.
Okay, so tell me a little bit about you, if you're okay with that. So how'd you get to where you are now, and why?
Wow. So I'll give you the Cliff Notes version of my early formation, I would say, is so I grew up in a small town in Northeast Texas near Texarkana. The town is called New Boston. The running joke, I said this in our BAPD podcast, but it is true. It bears repeating because it's true. And I actually had some members of New Boston that commented on that.
Wasn't the old Boston, was it?
It was next to, it was right between Boston and Old Boston, right? It was New Boston. It's true. And so, but I grew up right on I-30, basically halfway between Little Rock and Dallas. And, but I ended up at OU because I grew up watching my mom's whole side. My mom grew up in Midwest City. My dad moved around. He grew up in East Texas, but, he was in the Air Force. So he moved around. He met my mom when he was stationed at Tinker Air Force Base. And, I grew up watching OU play Nebraska the day after Thanksgiving. We would always be in Oklahoma for Thanksgiving around my mom's family, and I watched that game. So I ended up at OU. I was the first one in my family to go to college. Yeah, Sooner. First one in my family to go to college. And then comes the burnt part of the story, which is I got there during the John Blake and Howard Schnellenberger years. So yeah, that was I go there because I grow up watching these, the game of the century 1 and 2 and all this stuff. And I get there during the very lean years of OU football. But I got there, and like a lot of people thought, I had always had this calling, and I really do believe that policing is a calling. The normal person doesn't get into this job for fame, fortune, or money. It's just not going to happen, or for great schedules or any of this other kind of stuff, right? So it truly you really have to feel called to do this. And at an early age, I had been called, but because I didn't really have, my parents were great parents, but they didn't really prepare me for college or any of that stuff, or picking a career. And so you go into that. And I thought, like a lot of people that probably first entered college, of well, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go do a job that's going to make me a lot of money. And I was in public relations in the J school at OU. And
they were taking PR, like a PR bachelor degree?
Yeah.
That was your course? Okay.
Yeah. And so I remember my junior year, our professor had a husband that ran a PR firm in Oklahoma City. And while it's not the mecca of PR, it still was a reputable firm. And he walks in to give us a little day in the life or whatever. And he's like, yeah, I just hired 2. And I'm dating myself a little bit. This would have been 95, 96. He's like, I just hired 2 PR graduates from OU, and they're making $18,000 a year. And I was like, what? And so I had this moment where I thought, wow, I'm not going to get rich just because I have a degree that's not a STEM degree or computer science or, whatever. And then I had this moment where you know what, I should just do what I feel like is my purpose that I've been called to do. So I was very fortunate to get on with Norman Police Department. When I got on with Norman, I couldn't have told you the difference between one police department and another. or the difference between a sheriff's office and a municipal police department or a state agency. I didn't know any of those things.
Did you graduate with a PR degree and then go apply for Norman, or did you
actually switching degrees because of that?
Okay.
And got into the criminology degree at OU was through the sociology department. It was much more theory based. And so what I actually graduated with was liberal studies, which I love liberal studies, by the way, because it was a study of a little bit of everything. We did natural science, social science, humanities, the arts. Like my classes were an array of a little bit of everything.
Okay. All right. Now I'm on board. So graduated, got that, went to Norman.
So started with Norman, really had the opportunity to progress in my career with Norman, had great leaders, had not so great leaders, like a lot of organizations, right? So my leadership journey really began. I got my master's degree really because I thought, I need a backup, of what happens when I'm done with policing. And I really enjoyed teaching at our academy. Norman ran their own police academy, and I really enjoyed that. And I'm a learner at heart. My Clifton strengths number one is learner. And so I get my master's degree in criminal justice with the idea that I'm going to teach. And I did do some teaching at the college level and stuff like that. Never really thought about being a chief, but I was just kind of naturally progressing in the organization. Had some great opportunities to do some stuff. I worked, ran the training center, ran our academy.
You're in your 20s?
Well, not then. So when I first started, I was 22.
You were that 22-year-old guy with a badge and a gun, huh?
And I didn't know what I was doing. I'll be honest with you. I just had a conversation with one of our new officers that's out on his own. We had an event last night at McDonald's, Color with a Cop, and he was there, and he's been a great community ambassador for us. This is one of the reasons why he got involved in policing, was to do these community engagement events and stuff. And I'm talking to him, and he feels like a lot of them do at that point. Like, this is fantastic. I love what I'm doing. It's also terrifying because at any moment I have no idea what I'm doing, And I said, we have all been there, and it takes literally 5 years before I really feel like you're comfortable in your skin and doing policing, and you progressively get better, but there's always that little thing of like, I don't know if I really know what I'm doing. No.
Well, I'm sure you still have instances like that now. And there's
people all the time.
There's guys that are patrolling that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's my stick now. I say, and I do it to create a certain culture, but I'll tell them, listen, I'll make more mistakes in any given day than you will. I promise you, just to really make it okay to be like, you don't have to always have the answers. You don't always have to have the perfect solution. This is part of this constant learning and growth. But anyway, somewhere along the way, I came to this realization that while my purpose when I got into policing was to help people, like virtually anybody that comes in and is successful through an application period, that's going to be one of the big things is they want to help people, and they feel like that's the best way to do it. I've always had this sense of justice and morality and ethics and high integrity and all of these things, and it felt like this is perfect mold for me to be able to take those things that I value individually into an organization that also values those things and do what I wanted to do, which was help people. And then along the way, I was like, I transitioned to I want to help the police officers that used to be like me. And I want to be the leader that I think they deserve. And that all of a sudden became this driving force for me to be, I want to be that person that helps create conditions for them to thrive and flourish. I want to be that person that helps them change that statistic that the average police officer dies at 57 years old. And so that became kind of my own personal mission. And so I started looking for jobs. At the time, it didn't seem like Norman was going to be the right opportunity for me. The chief job wasn't even open at the time. And I started looking for opportunities of where that might be. And again, I think every part of my path has been really led by, God and led by that divine path that was created long before I realized what it was. And I landed in Weatherford, Texas, of all places, 25, 30 minutes from Fort Worth, but a progressive community, a community that is a lot like Broken Arrows in so many ways. Very supportive of the police, strong conservative values, strong faith-based community, but very progressive, rapidly growing, all of these things. And And what I kind of joke with is while very much like Broken Arrow, also very opposite of Norman. So it was kind of a time in my life too, where I was like, you know what, I can stand to serve in a community that may be a little bit more conservative leaning than what I was experiencing in Norman, and so although I do say if you can police in Norman, you can probably go police anywhere, because you get a little bit of everything in Norman, for literally every kind of ideology and all that kind of stuff, and so which was also part of my growth. But I get in Weatherford, and the question I have for myself is, I'd had great leaders and not so great leaders, and I felt like there was a way to run a police department that did exactly build a culture that all those things I've mentioned, people thrive and flourish, because I believe that once the people in the organization thrive and flourish, then the organization thrives, and then the community it serves thrives. And so I had an awesome experience to be able to grow that. And I got to step into some other roles as an assistant city manager. I served both roles. I every time I say that, I follow it up with, I don't recommend doing that. I'm not sure how I did it, but it was an extremely stressful time to be over police, fire, and emergency management, human resources, and planning and development.
Talk about wearing hats.
Yeah. Now they had directors, but I was ultimately the assistant city manager over that, and then still the police chief. And but it taught me a super, super valuable lessons of, one, that bigger picture I mentioned earlier. So the bigger picture of how a city operates, and where do the police fit into that cog of things. So that was huge for me. It offered me some insight into budgeting that even as a department director, maybe you don't always get. It offered me insight into managing different people that aren't in the police department, and leading those people, and different styles, because every one of the directors that I had the opportunity to lead, they were all different. And within the police department, I would say they're all different and unique too, but they all brought like this strong sense of responsibility, the strong sense of a high achiever, of belief in really strong integrity, strong commitment to ethics and values and all that kind of stuff. And not that these didn't, but they weren't as mission driven. They weren't as purpose driven. And so it was an opportunity to really kind of, okay, now lead with a different type of, people and professionals. And so, but along the way, I was like, this ACM gig's not for me. My passion is truly policing. And so I went home and talked to my wife, and I'm like, hey, there was no indication that I was going to leave Weatherford. There was no pressure to leave. There was no anything. There was just this little feeling that I really think was, again, a calling that I was needed somewhere else. And I go home and I talk to my wife, native Oklahoman, born and raised in Norman. Both my kids were born in Norman. And I said, if we were to leave here, where do you want to go? And she said, I want to be back in Oklahoma. And this part gives me chills to this day. Within a week or two, the job in Broken Arrow opened. And I was like, if this is a sign, and my experience having been here is that it was already an exceptional department. It was led by exceptional leaders in the past, but what I bring to the table was something that was needed there. And at the same time, what they offer is something that I needed, right? That it was the perfect marriage of those things. I needed to be back fully committed to policing and not be spread around to all of these other things, because that's really where I derive my energy, my passion, my purpose is really in that realm. I can do those other things, but the days that I would go to City Hall, and I had an office in City Hall and an office in the public safety building, and the days that I would go to City Hall, I dreaded going to work. And the days that I would go to the public safety building, I couldn't wait to get to work. And that's how I feel every day now in Broken Arrow, right? And so it was just that perfect timing. It was God's timing. It was right place, right time, and right point in my career that gave me, and I've told people this, and I told Mr. Spurgeon when I was going through the interview process, that I feel like if I'd have left Norman to try to, in the state in Norman, and then try to get this job in Broken Arrow, I don't know that I would have been as good a candidate, and I'm not even sure. Well, I don't know that I would have been a successful candidate, but I don't know that I would have been able to come in and make as big an impact as quickly as I've been able to do, because I still make plenty of mistakes, but I made a lot more in my first go around as a chief, right? And it was a smaller agency, but it was an opportunity to really grow and develop and start to fine tune some things, and also start to realize what really matters when you're building culture and what doesn't matter as much when you're doing those things. You know, one of the things I hang my hat on is this idea, and I stole this from, I didn't steal it, I borrow it from a group of really thought leaders in policing. And Simon Sinek actually is part of this group, and it's called the Curve. But culture, you know, you either have culture by design or by default. So you have to be very intentional about building your culture. And I had I won't say a trial run, because I think it worked out fantastically in Weatherford, but I had an opportunity to make a lot more mistakes. I think Broken Arrow, not that it wouldn't be forgiving, but it's a much bigger game here, right?
And it's got some framework existing already, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah. So you needed somebody, I think, that could come in with the skill set that I had and the passion that I have, really to just ignite that group of exceptionally talented people we have in the organization. So,
okay, you ready for some rapid fire questions?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is, and I don't even know. This one isn't rapid fire. Is leadership learned or is it innate?
Both, absolutely.
Which one's first?
You know, I think there are some innate qualities that want to drive somebody to be a leader. And a leader is not positional, in my opinion, right? You can have a leader that's a frontline employee and absolutely a leader. And you can have somebody that's a chief executive and not a leader at all. So I think there's a certain innate qualities that drive people to want to take on the mantle of leadership. But then I think after that, you got to have some fine tuning, whether that be some hard knocks experience, some actual, traditional learning, all of those things combined, I think you become more seasoned, and I think a better leader as you start to kind of grow and make mistakes and learn from those things and learn from others. So I think all those things are important.
Someone stepping into a leadership role for the first time, is there any ideas or advice that come to mind?
Just do it. Be humble. Don't give yourself grace. Don't be so hard on yourself.
So hard to do.
Yeah.
I'm sure even now for you, and I know for me, I hold my I try a lot of times. I hold myself to a standard. People are like, no one holds herself to that standard. Why are you doing that? And I think we all do that. And then we all say that we don't. And I don't know. It's
the last one would be authentic, man. Be what you say you are and who you say you are. Make sure that your actions, behavior, and words are aligned, because people see it when they're not, and you'll lose them in a heartbeat. So,
is there anything you wish people would understand or relate to or be more understanding of in police leadership?
I think people don't realize sometimes maybe how much, and it's not just even in leadership, but how much we care, how much we bring home when we miss the mark, and how much it bothers us, or how we can't take something back, or even when our people experience negative things, or there's a negative event in the community, how much those things, the reputation, just the livelihood of the community, you feel like is on your shoulders. Public safety is, and you hear every politician and every, city administrator, and they're not wrong, but they there's a reason why they always mention public safety as one of the top few things that are important. And it's important to most people. But it is a lot of weight at times, that when you have a string of, crimes or things, or even just a crime that shocks the senses. And we've had our fair share of those in Broken Arrow. The weight of that, and it's not just the weight on leadership, it's the weight of that on the entire department, every single member. regardless of what their role is, because there's that expectation. People come to Broken Arrow, they live in Broken Arrow because it is safe. And when something happens that shocks that sense, we take it personal.
Yeah. Well, you've got some responsibility and a lot heavier than, more of the janitorial side of things, right?
Right.
Not to disregard that, but
Right.
so I think I might have an idea on how you'll answer this. Is it better just to jump right in and get started, or to be prepared?
I'm a jump right in guy. So again, bringing it back to Clifton Strengths, I have activators number 10. I tell people that I'm which I've learned in my Clifton Strengths journey, I've learned to surround myself with people that are not activators, because I need those very deliberate people. They're going to be like, hey, Chief, we're about to go in the bar ditch, bro. Like we maybe need to back off the accelerator a little bit. But I'm a all gas, no brake guy.
My mom would say I live my life Mach 5 with my hair on fire,
Right.
if you know that reference.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And so, but I have to remember that not everybody's like that, right? And I have to give grace to those others that aren't like that.
I forget that.
And it's tough, right? Because I see it. And that's the other thing, too, is I can see it really clearly. Maybe they don't. And back to that communication piece, maybe I haven't done a great job of communicating what that is. And so as I'm ready to go, I've got to make sure everybody else is on the bus with me. And, and so I'm a definitely jump right in, because I think we talked about that is leadership learned or innate. Part of it is that experience and that growth. And so if you're sitting around waiting, it's kind of like this is what I tell people that are considering trying to promote or become a formal leader. And I hear almost say, well, maybe it's not the right time. And I say, it's just like having kids. There's never the right time to have kids. I don't care how much, books you've read, how much you think you're prepared.
Money.
Right.
So you saved up.
Yeah. None of that matters. Right. And it's never going to happen when it's the perfect time. And so you just have to jump in and have faith that it's going to work out.
Well, imagine being an officer on a call, right?
Yeah.
For those who can't imagine it, let's try to imagine. And you're like, let me think. How should I go to this call? What should I be prepared to bring on this call? Oh, I got to go run a few errands on my way to this call. And then you arrive to the call and you're like, okay, what's going on here before I get out of my car? You're like, no, everyone's dead by then. Like, it's too late. I'm like, well, you almost got to jump right in.
And I think it's the same for leadership, and it's the same for that police officer that you're talking about. And I think that's why you see, in policing, the opportunity really to have fantastic leaders, because both of them, where they join, and I don't care, again, if you're talking about business, policing, whatever it may be, is critical thinking, judgment, problem solving. What you're hoping you're going to get from that leader, from that police officer, from whatever, is somebody that has the ability to think critically, to solve problems, and has good judgment. And I think it's a natural transition in the policing world, because every time we show up to a call, especially things like disturbances and all that kind of stuff, everybody is looking to us to be that leader. In that particular call, that police officer is the leader. It takes the groups, gets them together, it finds some common ground. They agree to disagree, whatever it is, but they're solving problems. And they're doing it from that position that everybody's looking for them to have the answer. And so leadership is very similar to that. Everybody's coming in, the world is on fire, and they're coming into your office, Braedon, and what should we do? Right. And your reaction, and for me, I guess I've always just been this kind of as passionate and as loud as I am and as animated as I am. In those moments, I'm usually calm and still. And I think that's the first thing that happens is that in that moment, in that crisis, or what they perceive to be a crisis, is I project that this is not a big deal and everything's going to be fine. And that energy, whether positive or negative, is contagious. It absolutely is. They proved it in research. Put people in a room, you tell the control person to be a certain way, and without a spoken word, all those people are going to end up being that same way. And so it's contagious. And so I think that's part of that thing, whether, again, back to that police officer or that leader, is calm, cool, and collected, humble, not having all the answers, being able to look somebody in the eye and go, I don't know, let's figure it out together, and being okay with that, and I think that's huge. And I don't care, again, I think that transitions across any profession when you're talking about that kind of person. You've got the people that are more strategically minded. You've got the people that are more of the dreamer, you got the more analytical people, and they all have a role. But I think, again, what people are looking at for them is that what are they like when it's on the line, when the shit has hit the fan, right? How are they going to respond? And everybody's looking for that. And then I think you go from there. But
last question.
Okay.
Are you lucky or smart?
Man, I would say that I am incredibly blessed. And I would say that I am more lucky than smart most of the time. So I think people refer to me as being smart, but then I think stuff just has a way of working out. And so I call that lucky, because, again, I'm not that sit around and think about it for a long time and find the perfect path and perfect solution.
Yeah.
And stuff just has a way of working out.
Man, we could talk all day about this stuff.
Yeah.
I feel like, but I really appreciate being able to just learn your perspectives and understand. It's cool to know your history and stuff. And man, I grew up in Broken Arrow, graduated from Broken Arrow, I remember Main Street wasn't there.
Yeah.
I remember a lot of things have changed, and it's great to see Broken Arrow where it is now. And
Right.
I've moved around kind of since then.
Yeah.
But I'm going to wind up back, hopefully sooner rather than later, pun intended. But hopefully I wind up back there in the next 2 years is the goal.
Yeah.
I hear
so many people.
27.
Yeah.
We tried to move back. Nothing was really available at the time. This was like 2022. So it was like 2 years after COVID. It was a really weird time because like the housing stuff. And I was like, I don't want to buy a house at whatever is 8% interest rate. And I was like, nah, then I got to refi it and do all that in a year or two. If it is a year or two, who knows?
Yeah.
I was like, nah, we're just going to rent for a while. So we wound up in Bixby for now, but
I hear, I think that's the other part that makes Broken Arrow special, even as it grows and even as we bring in outsiders like me. I can see, this will be my home, and my wife will certainly be able to weigh into that. But this will be the place even long after my career is done with the city. And I've said, this is my last stop. I didn't come here looking for the next job. This is it for me.
It's home. I'm
here for the long haul, but the number of people that I hear that grew up here and did go away, but they feel that sense to come back, and they miss that, but then they benefit from the growth that has become Broken Arrow and all that is there, and really in a lot of ways the ability to self-sustain there, to not have to go to Tulsa for everything or, and all that. And I think that's one of the things that's really cool and exciting. I mean, I talk about the high potential at the police department, but what drew me really even to look at the job to begin with was the high potential of the city, the entire community, I get giddy thinking about what that's going to look like and the ability to be able to watch that and have that front row seat of that.
I love that word giddy.
Yeah.
They use, you're just like,
I know I am, but I mean, I get that front row seat of just watching this thing happen.
Yeah.
So.
Man, it was a pleasure. Thank you.
Here.
Appreciate it.
Here. Thank you.